Hi, I'm Bill Anderson, and welcome to Expat Radio. And I'm delighted to welcome today Peter Jones. Peter, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Bill.
Now, Peter, we are going to be talking about birds, and I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea here. We are talking about the two-winged variety, yeah?
That's right. Ones with feathers.
Yes, the ones with feathers, indeed.
That's it.
So, Peter, but first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and, where are you from in the UK? What did you do in the UK?
Well, I'm a Swindonian from Wiltshire originally,
Right.
but educated, and if you can call it that, and brought up on the Hampshire-Surrey border in a town called Fleet,
Okay.
and then went on to uni at Bristol and then Edinburgh, and basically got interested in biology and followed that course. Um, and that was my life in the UK, really, and sort of wandering around the whole countryside looking for birds, looking at mammals, looking at flowers, looking at insects, looking at plants. It's yeah, it's an all-embracing thing with nature, really. So, and from a very early age.
Yes. So your professional background what was in biology then, yeah?
Yes, yes, and that led, of course, to an interest in functioning animal life and plant life. My wife's the expert on plants, so that assists me when I'm out and about and gives me a good insight into ecology as well, looking at the various habitats that we have here in Andalucia. And yes, it's been a lifelong passion. I mean, it started for me years and years ago. I mean, my father was working for an agricultural company. He was a crop inspector.
All right.
He used to take me around in his old Standard 8, and we used to go around all these different farms. And it was then really that I got to notice birds and notice animal life,
Right.
and became very interested in that. And then he sort of encouraged that interest, as a good dad would do, because he obviously saw it as some sort of healthy pursuit. I don't think he realised how unhealthy it could be, but he sort of led me into that, and he gifted me some books so I could identify birds. And in those days, of course, many years ago, it used to be that you go looking for nests and things like that. And if you happen to be handling an egg and a policeman come by, he'd ask you what bird it was. It was that kind of a difference between then and now.
Right.
It's a very sort of frowned upon pursuit. But anyway, those sort of things got me interested, and I was active going out on my push bike around the countryside. When we moved to Hampshire, there was a vast amount of heathland around. It was
Right.
military land, a lot of it actually, but open space, and you could wander around in these areas and to your heart was content. And I think it was then more than anything else that I became very attached to birds in particular. But there were also mammals around that I got interested in, and various plants. But birds have always been a prime fascination.
Right. So, in your professional life, then, what was a lot of your time as a biologist spent in a sort of very confined, formal setting, or were you out and about in the countryside?
Well, I had peers who would try to bully me at Edward Gray's Institute and places like that to come in and run projects, but I'd always had a passion to be out and do research in the field rather than be tied to an office desk. And that I pursued until I eventually retired. And the retirement actually didn't happen until I'd been in Spain for about 5 years. So, um, but it was always a pursuit and a passion to be out and
Right.
researching live the subject of your research. So, yeah, so I'd always been around and doing that.
Uh, so, Peter, you spent all of your working life really in the UK,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Well, I'm traveling a lot. I'm traveling a lot as well. Did some overseas work too, but
right.
yeah, but mostly centered around the Hampshire Surrey area, and also did some research work down in Cornwall,
Right.
uh, also in Jersey, met my wife and married her in Jersey.
Ah, right.
So no, so I've sort of been like a bit of a rolling stone, really, and getting around and gathering a lot of moss. But that really is, yeah, it's been an interesting life and
Yeah,
a wonderful one. Not so well paid, but very
right.
good.
But you've enjoyed it.
Oh my
You,
God, yeah,
sorry, no, 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 no,
I'd
no.
do it all over again.
You are enjoying it, not you have enjoyed it.
Well,
That
exactly,
implies that
exactly.
the enjoyment is past, doesn't it?
I'm probably busier now that I'm supposed to be retired than I was when I was working. So
Yeah,
um, all kinds of people make demands on you, or at least inquire of you to do things, and particularly here in Andalusia.
yeah. So how did Spain come about then, Peter?
Well, it was, I suppose, looking ahead, sort of, we all get to an age and you're sort of looking ahead a little bit and looking at retirement. But there was an opportunity to come here and study a particular bird for around about 5 years, which is black wheatear. It's a black bird, but it's the old Saxon word wheatear actually refers to a part of the body, which is what they refer to as a white arse.
Oh, right, okay.
Well, that's the meaning of wheatear. And so you've got this black bird with a white arse, basically, and this bird was declining, or thought to be declining. It was in France, a little bit in France over the other side of the Pyrenees, but it's actually a bird now that's confined to the Iberian Peninsula and mostly around mountainous areas. There are some on coastal hillsides, and it was actually a thing that when I was looking at this bird, I couldn't tell the organisers of the research project, but it was increasing. They may have cut me off short if they found out it was increasing in my area. So I catched them about that until the end, and then basically well, my wife and I loved Spain so much. I mean, the lifestyle. I mean,
Sure,
you know what I mean, Bill.
I do.
It's very relaxed. The people are so friendly. I mean, surprisingly friendly, actually. And of course, the food and the pace of life, and the weather, of course. Although up here, where I'm living in Ronda, which is on the outside of Ronda, which is high up in the mountains,
It is
we're
indeed.
well over 2,000 feet up here, and um, where the house is, and so we do get a winter, and we quite like that. We like the business that we get seasons.
Yeah.
It's not. It's something we would miss, I think, if we didn't have that.
Well, I have to say, Peter, I do to a large extent miss the seasons because I'm right down here on the coast.
Yeah.
And I say that down here there are two seasons. It's summer and not summer. And, and
Yeah, good
uh,
description. Yeah,
that really is about the biggest kind of I don't know contrast that we tend to get down here. And
yeah,
I do miss the kind of colder mornings sometimes and the sort of fresh crispness
yeah.
in the winter.
You
Um,
certainly get that here, I can tell you. All the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
But you still get many more sunny days than you do anything that's overcast or people would associate with bad weather in the UK, for instance. But
sure.
it's yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy those crisp days. I mean, I did in the UK. I don't know about you. Those lovely sunny days where there was a frost on the ground and and the air was crisp and fresh. And it kind of
Yeah,
livened you up. And perhaps in my dotage, I need something like that to liven me up sometimes. So
right.
the winter time can be an active time.
Yeah, but you have chosen an exquisite part of the south of Spain
Yeah,
to make your
beautiful.
home in.
Yeah.
If anyone doesn't know Ronda or the surrounding area, can you just describe it for us, Peter?
Oh my God, I can tell you now because in my retirement I actually was employed to do guiding tours.
All right.
And that was China, India, South Africa, all over the world, and South America, Central America. And I can only tell you that when I come back here, all these wonderful places that I visit throughout the world and guiding people in nature, I come back here and I look at it and I think, my God, there is no peer to this. This is paradise. It's my little bit of heaven, if you like. And you've got very high limestone mountains. We've got up to 2,000 meters just the other side of Ronda on the coastal side,
Yeah.
which you'll know, and very important for the area because the snow in the winter, of course, it's permeous limestone. So when you get the snow melts, it permeates into aquifers and stuff. And so
Sure.
Ronda actually is very, very, very fortunate in terms of its water supply.
Yeah.
So that's an essential item as well as being beautiful to look at. But I don't think, I've not read anywhere where there's anything definitive about how this mountain chain was formed. But the theory is, it was a collision of the European plate with African plate and
Right.
pushed all this lot up about 80 million years ago. And the chain starts, of course, with Gibraltar. And then comes across Ronda up to 2,000 meters, and then goes on to Granada, of course, which is the highest mountain range in Europe outside of the Alps.
Right.
And then it slowly subsides. And then, I don't know if many people know this, but the range pops up again as the Balearics. That's the same mountain chain as
Right.
we have here in Ronda.
I don't think
Did
I
you know
knew
that?
that. No, I don't think I knew that.
It's quite young. 80 million years in geology terms is nothing.
Yeah.
It's quite young. And so you've got a mixture of this limestone, high bare mountains. Years ago during the Ice Age, the Ice Age never actually got this far. It was just heavy rainfall and perhaps some ice caps on some of the mountain tops, no glaciers or anything like that.
Right.
So the whole thing with erosion down here is water erosion.
Right.
And in that time, of course, with these heavy rains, incredible rainfalls, that basically washed off the soils from these mountains to expose these limestone peaks, and then made the valleys and hillsides around here quite fertile.
Yeah.
So although stony, the soil is very fertile. And you've got this mixture, this fantastic mixture of habitat. You've got these high mountains, bare mountains, dramatic mountains, and then you've got these pine forests with the pin sapper, of course, which you probably know about.
Sure.
It's an endemic tree. It's unique to us here down in Andalucia. It's a pre-glacial species as a palm. And then you've got these pine forests, then evergreen oaks. And then you've got the cultivated areas where there's farming going on, and you've got these cork oak dehesas, which is like parkland. If people don't know what the word dehesa means, it's like scattered trees with pastures underneath which are grazed, and with all these wild pigs and cattle and goats and eating the acorns. And of course, then there is a double crop for the farmer, of course, because then he's got his cork. And then he's got the acorn. So every 9 years or so around here, anyway, they can crop their cork, and then the acorns provide fodder for pigs.
Sure.
And the cattle. That amazed me when I moved here because at home, if a cow or a horse or whatever was browsing on acorns, you'd need to call the vet because they blow up with gas and they would die. But here they're impervious to acorns and can gorge on them and be perfectly happy and healthy. So yeah.
So and really, Ronda's really only about an hour from the coast, something like that.
Less than really.
Less than an hour, and it's a beautiful city, isn't it?
I think it's wonderful, and particularly the old quarter. It's very historical, and you got that new bridge.
The new bridge, yes,
which is several hundred years old. But that links the old parts of Ronda to the new, and the population is around about 38,000. So it's very funny for me when I meet Americans, particularly in groups that come here as tourists to look at the nature. One of the things they really look forward to is a visit to Ronda, because of the history there with Orson Welles and Hemingway and things.
Absolutely.
And they're really disappointed because their preconception is a village.
Right.
But
Okay.
Rwanda is one of the white villages, and of course it's not. It's a major town, and with that kind of a population. But they after explanations and stuff and a little wander around and given a bit of freedom to wander around on their own, they fall in love with the place, of course, and the natural friendliness of the people, and it's genuine too. It's not sort
Yeah.
of not everybody out for the buck of the tourist. It's a very genuine place, and the people have been really, really friendly and helpful to me.
Sure.
So it's a wonderful place to visit. Yeah.
Yeah, I
What?
think I'm sure it was Hemingway that made some statements about Rhonda that, you know, if you can't fall in love in Rhonda, then basically
Yeah,
you're lost.
yeah. Well, I won't go into it, but he used some bad language actually in some of his quotes. But anyway, uh, some of the listeners might not appreciate that, but so probably not dwell on that one. But I mean, it is, yeah, very funny. And of course, he's got this great rivalry with Seville, you
Of
know, about the
course, yes.
bull ring. Because you know, Ronda says it's got the first bull ring ever, and then Seville says it's got the first bull ring ever,
Hmm.
and of course the argument then turns around to the fact that, well, even if you did have, your bull ring is square. This
Right.
is the Seville one, and of course in Ronda ours was the first round one,
All
and
right. Okay.
a proper bull ring they
Yeah.
call it.
Yeah.
So it's funny, this rivalry that you get, you know. So
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you've chosen a absolutely exquisite place to live, and
yeah.
you are very much in the countryside, aren't you?
Oh, very much. I mean, and you're not far from some great places. I mean, you can visit off the mountains into the Spanish plains. I suppose people listening would better understand, but we call it steppe type habitat, very flat and cultivated areas where you get unique wildlife. And that's for me Osuna and around that area, and it's for me
Right.
that's just an hour's journey. And then, say, 40 minutes up the road, I can go to Fuente de Piedra, where you've got this mass display of greater flamingos, which is one of the biggest gatherings of flamingos in Europe.
Right.
So yeah, you're surrounded by, and of course we've got the national parks. You've got Sierra de Grazalema, which is right on my doorstep.
Of course.
Literally, I fall out of my house and I'm into that park. If I go the other side around, I've got the national park Sierra de las Nieves, which is established for the last 2 years as a national park. And then you've got El Conacales, which is a biggest forest protected area in Europe.
Right.
And so
Okay.
you're literally surrounded
Yeah.
by these wonderful places that you can just wander in, loads of walks and free access everywhere. It's just amazing.
I have to say, Peter, it sounds as if you've done a lot more sort of exploring around the area where you live than I actually have. I've been here 20 years, and
Well, I mean, it's a necessity for my work, wasn't it, to begin with?
sure.
Because I had to travel around. I mean, the first year I had to go around these Sarania de Ronda and Sierra de Grazalema just to look at habitats
Right.
and discount places where I knew I wasn't going to find this black wheat here, and other places where I knew I would. And so there was this whole period of time of just exploring. And it was amazing because, of course, you've got people living in Ronda, Spanish people who are interested in birds and wildlife,
Mm,
and I was finding things that they thought didn't exist here.
right.
And there was, of course, this. All right, okay, you know, his English is a bit of a romantic. No, that's not here. And then I had several occasions where I had to take them out and show them, for them to believe me that these things
Right.
were there. And so eventually, I think I could say anything now, and they believe me now.
Yeah.
So it's
But
I could make
was that
things up
just
now.
was that because they didn't know what to look for because they were looking in the wrong place?
I just think they had limited time because I mean they're all professionals in different areas, and they probably just had weekends
Right.
because holidays they would probably leave. There's always an extras here in Rwanda to go to your beaches
Yes, indeed.
with the families in the summer. So I suppose by and large their holidays would be spent away from here rather than in it to explore it more. Um, and so I just think it was because I was full time um, and just had the time to explore areas where they necessarily wouldn't perhaps go themselves, because they would have their favourite little places where they would, they call it in birding terms, they call it their local patch, you know,
Right.
where they would go out and explore that area constantly and over a period of time to gather information about that particular area without really exploring their homelands,
Right.
which was extraordinary, really.
Yeah.
But okay, I understood it, and of course they're dear friends now, so I better not be too damning about their exploration exploits.
Uh-huh.
So I better keep that one under wraps.
How's your Spanish, Peter?
Bloody awful, actually.
That good, yeah.
Well, one of the things with that, of course, is because I was pretty isolated doing the work with the wheat here. I learned, of course, things that I needed to learn, and actually doing Latin. Some of it struck a bell when I heard it.
Right.
In actual fact, given that, I should actually be speaking much better Spanish. But the other thing was, when I was touring or guiding groups here, of course they were from North Europe or America or Central Europe, and they didn't speak Spanish. So, but a lot of them, their second language was English.
Right.
So I've got some excuse, but not entirely. I think I'm lazy as well, in typical Brit, really. I think we're all in that sort of a catch-all, aren't you? Because wherever you go in the world, you can by and large get away with speaking English.
Yeah, but you're living in an area that is, I would say, far more typically Spanish
Oh
than where I
yes,
live here on the coast.
there is a need for me to be able to speak um, some of the local language. I mean, I always joke, it's not Spanish, is it? It's Andalus.
It's
You know,
Andalou,
because
yeah, Andalou.
everything is really shortened down, or and very gruff. And it's extraordinary for me, because there's a language school down in Marbella that has these business people come down from Santander and Bilbao, and they do this intensive course where they're, they're not allowed to speak Spanish, and you're not allowed to speak Spanish to them. And I was asked to take this group to Fuente de Piedra,
Okay.
because they thought, well, it might be interesting for them, because they're flamingos, after all, big birds, pink and beautiful. And so I took them around, and we had a bit of a laugh and a few things. And then we went to like a restaurant in the middle of the village. And of course, the caballero comes out and tells them what the menu of the day is in his Spanish.
Yeah.
And then they're all looking at me completely nonplussed, because they didn't understand a word of what he said.
No, no.
So I was in this bizarre situation where I was translating for this local guy to these Spanish guys from the north,
Right,
and
right.
so it was extraordinary.
Yeah,
But yeah, I get by. But I mean, I mean, the grammar is ridiculous. I mean, all those tenses, and 6 of them are past tense. How can you have 6 past tenses in a language? And the horrifying thing is, of course, they use them all. And so
yeah.
when I'm out with Spanish friends and I start reading off in my broken Spanish, I always get tenses wrong, and they always collapse on the floor and laughing at me and saying, "But it's okay, we understand you." So and that's probably the problem, is where they're saying, "It's okay, we understand you." Or
Right.
sometimes they give up on me and say, "Okay, look, speak English," because you know, it depends. I have good days and bad days with it.
Yeah,
So
but the thing about the accents, you know, we tend to think that it's something exclusive to the area that we live in, but you know, when you travel around the UK,
yeah,
you know, someone has learned English, or they may be English, and they go to Liverpool or Newcastle or Glasgow
yeah,
or Aberdeen,
Glasgow.
uh,
There's the thing, Bill. Back
and
to your homeland. I mean,
well, yeah, but you
yeah,
know, I remember being on a train going from Edinburgh to Glasgow with my wife and her daughter, and the ticket collector came round and he said something, so I gave him the ticket, and Elisa said, "What did he say?" And I said, "I haven't a clue, but I knew he wanted the
yeah.
tickets."
But he was wearing a uniform, so I gave
Yeah,
him the tickets. Well,
yeah.
I had this thing where I got flown over. I was working away, and I got flown over to be a best man at a wedding in Glasgow. And of course, not knowing, being a heathen, I thought Glasgow Airport was Glasgow.
Right.
Press it was, well, and I know now, of course, that it isn't. And I was met by a taxi driver who was a friend of the group,
Yeah.
who'd come to pick me up. They helped the sign up, as you do at the airport. Well, I got to tell you, probably for a good half of that journey, I never understood a bloody word that he was saying. And in the end, I had to say to him, I said, "Look, can you speak a bit slower?" Then, because I'm normally pretty good. Actually, it surprised me because I'm normally very good at picking up on accents
Yeah.
and listening and understanding. But this baffled me. It was a first for me. It's embarrassing. And then of course he said, "Oh, what's up with you?" and all that. And of course, the culture in Glasgow, because as best man, I was told the night before, no Scottish jokes, Peter.
Uh, and you had a whole stack of them.
No jokes about Scotland. Otherwise, you'll get, because it was Paisley,
Oh, yes, I
so
know Paisley very
quite,
well.
quite,
Yeah.
quite a place.
Yeah.
And so I was told to behave myself, and so I hope I did. Anyway, I didn't get lumped by anybody, and I survived the experience.
Peter, we're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, I want to talk a lot more about the whole bird watching thing and about doing this in Spain. Welcome back. You're listening to Expat Radio. I'm Bill Anderson, and I'm delighted to have my guest today, Peter Jones. And actually, we've been talking about his experiences in Andalucia and in Ronda, in the area, surrounding area in particular. But I really want to focus on the probably the second love of your life, if I can say that, Peter. Welcome back.
Good to be back. I'm surprised that you've had me back. But anyway.
Peter, I was probably going to say something very asinine that, we used to call bird watchers twitchers, yeah?
Oh, don't do that.
No, 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 I'm not going to do that, but I'm saying we used to, and I now know that you're birders.
That's right.
Yes.
Bird watchers and twitchers are quite different,
Oh, are they?
they can be a combination of both. Well, a twitcher is somebody who loves to get out and around and just look at rarities, and
Right.
they have a list and they tick off. It's a bit like collecting stamps, I suppose. They sort of go through
Or,
that scenario
or
of
collecting
collection,
train numbers or
and
something, yeah?
yeah, and it's a strange thing, and I've never understood that myself, but I've got several friends who would say they're twitchers.
Right.
But then there are people who just like to go bird watching and just see what they see.
Okay.
And then, as I say, you do get combinations of both. You get somebody who loves to do that, but also will travel hundreds of miles and even catch planes and all sorts of silly things to see one particular bird.
All right. So,
And
so, so the Twitcher is just looking to tick it off his list and say,
yeah,
"I've seen one of these." Yeah.
yeah. And if, of course, it's a poor, bedraggled, windblown, storm-blown bird from North America and it ends up in the UK, it gets surrounded by these
Uh,
telescopes and binoculars. Everybody's, wow, yeah, well, I can tick that off my list now.
right.
Not many people are going to have this one. And
Right.
so there's a bit of competitiveness
Ah,
as
okay.
well. And
So, what about Spain, though, Peter? Are we talking about a very different selection of birds, either native or migratory birds, in Spain than you would, for example, in the UK?
oh yeah, I mean, we've got much greater variety and all year round. We've got some birds, of course, that have actually made it to the UK in the last 12 months. For instance, this colourful bird called a bee-eater,
Right.
a magnificent looking bird, very colourful, probably our most colourful bird in Europe, which is common with us and breeds all around. And there was a great big thing I think it was in Norfolk somewhere, where they bred this year, and they had to put a fence around it to stop people getting too close, and then a sort of staging area where people could watch from without disturbing the birds. So we've got things like that. And we've got, and some of these birds will turn up as rarities in North Europe, things like hoopoe,
Yeah.
which I think if people play golf in the winter time, they will see those because they love golf courses with the shortened grass. They dig up the grubs and beetle larvae, and not sure if the greenkeepers would like them too much.
Uh-huh.
But and they're a bizarre. They always remind me of a sort of feathered pterodactyl. You know, they've got this anvil-shaped head,
Ah,
and
yeah.
but fantastic birds. And of course, my passion, life passion, is wheatears, the family of wheatears. And of course, in the UK, we get the northern wheatear, which is a particularly handsome bird. But here in Spain, we've got three species.
Okay.
And if I hop across the water to Morocco, I can get 7 or 8 species. So
Right.
it's just like, for me, it's heaven. And,
Yeah.
I've got these white asses that I can look at. And so no, they're wonderful. And then there's whole groups of birds. I mean, raptor-wise, eagle-wise,
Right.
we've got a bigger variety, much bigger variety than you've got in the UK, because really we've only got the white-tailed sea eagle and you've got the golden eagle. Here we've got the golden eagle, of course, but then we've got booted. We've got the snake eagle, European snake eagle, which has got short-toed eagle, they call it. It literally has short claws,
Right.
short toes, and that's to get around the snake's body because it feeds 90% on snakes. And so it's to get its toes around the snake so it can kill it quickly because
Right.
it doesn't have any immunity to snake bites. So it's very important that it kills this thing. And then we got Benelli's eagle, which is probably one of the biggest populations in Europe. So a lot of actual ornithological tourism comes from the north of Europe,
Right.
Scandinavia, Central Europe, just to see that bird, actually. So tourism-wise too, Spain is a big attraction for bird watchers in Scandinavia, America, UK,
Right.
throughout Northern Europe and Central Europe, because of this variety that we have, and
Yeah.
also because of this mixture of habitat and wild areas that we have, open areas, which is getting less and less
Yeah.
everywhere else.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. I have to say though, I nearly drove off a cliff one day. I was heading up from Marbella up around Juanar, which
Yeah.
is really starting to climb, and you've got the big gullies at the side, and it looks like a very long drop. And there were these two eagles flying right down the valley, and I
Oh,
was kind of transfixed with these eagles, and it's a pretty windy road.
well, and I think it's a fascination, isn't it? Even if people aren't really bird watchers, or
Yeah,
there's always a fascination with eagles. I think owls is another one that most people like to see if they can.
yeah.
And of course, what we've got around here is griffon vultures and
The
vultures,
vultures, yes.
and they're huge. I mean, a wingspan of 9 feet,
Yeah,
and are just massive,
yeah.
and can weigh up to 8 kilos. So it's a massive, massive bird, and that's again around us, this southern part of Spain. Is
Sure.
probably one of the most important areas for that species in Europe. So we're very blessed with these things. I mean, I get them over the house all the time, and I never get tired of seeing them. I've been here 20 years too, by the
Right.
way, and to see these things, I've never tired.
No.
They're just so graceful in here. They're, of course, quite a transformation when they're on the ground because they've got this ugly head and all the rest of it. Well, I call them beautifully ugly. Gets me out of tight corners.
Yeah, but they are when you see these big birds because in the UK I don't know I don't really remember seeing a lot of big birds. And when you see these big birds, as you say, your eyes are just glued to them.
Yeah,
The grace, they're moving very quickly, but give this impression of moving almost in slow motion, and it's
that's
just
right.
beautiful.
and this thing they do, where they just hang in here and then circle around in these thermals, and gives you great views sometimes. And
Yeah,
if you're fortunate, you can get these views. And of course, I'm fortunate where I am because all these species are very common,
yeah,
so I see them quite often.
yeah.
So yeah. So you've got it's a real combination, of course, and you've got these times of year in the spring and the autumn, where in Europe you've got two migration routes basically. You've got the one in the east, which is across the Bosphorus and around there through Turkey and into Asia and Africa that
Hmm.
way. And then you've got us, where if you look at the map, you can see Spain comes down to a point, and that's only 14 kilometers away from North Africa.
Sure.
So historically, the birds have evolved to come this way because it's got the shortest sea crossing to
Yeah.
get to Africa where they need to be and need to get to for their winter.
Mm.
So you've got this massive migration that takes place northwards in the spring, where these birds return in thousands. I mean, we're talking raptors, I mean, black-eyed booted eagles, short-tailed eagles, in their thousands.
Right.
And if you're fortunate with the wind direction and everything, and you're down at Tarifa and around that area, you can witness just these huge flocks of birds arriving or departing.
Right.
And more so, I think autumn's probably for me a better time because you've got then the adults leaving along with the juveniles of the year. So you've got more bulk, if you like, in birds
Right.
in the autumn. But it is just, and I think everybody, it doesn't matter if you're interested in birds or not, it's a spectacle. And I think
Absolutely.
it's something that everybody should try and witness because they've got the opportunity, if you live here,
Yes.
just to nip along and see it. In September, it's a good time.
Sure.
And just fantastic.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, people get along to Tarifa in the autumn
Ha,
and
ha,
see it for
ha.
yourself, and you'll be open mouthed. And they're coming so close to you as well.
Yes.
At times.
Are you also a photographer then, Peter? Do you try to
No,
photograph these
not really.
birds?
Oh, well, I do. Yeah, I do a lot of photography, but as a diary, or as a diary kind of a supplement for my day out. I've only got a Nikon bridge camera. Really, it's one of these with the extending lens that comes out, and it comes out to 2,000 millimeter
Right.
lens, so I can get birds to come quite close to me on the lens, and I do that. But only that really, it's a kind of a diarist thing. It's something for me personally to look through and remind myself of certain things that I've seen that are interesting,
Right.
um, and actually it can be quite relaxing. You can go to some places where there's a lot of activity with birds, sit quietly in your car with the window down, and
Uh-huh.
just watch these things. I normally choose that. I'm around in Sierra de las Nieves. You've got these old drovers trails, which you probably know,
Yes,
and
sure.
and along these places, you've normally got somewhere along there a trough, a drinking trough. Um, at this time of the year, and you know how dry we've had the year this year.
Sure. Yes.
Just yesterday, I was up at Sierra de las Nieves in a park near one of these troughs, and it was just staggering the number of birds coming
Mm.
there to drink. And there must have been a mass arrival to things like blackbird, which a lot of people think are just resident birds. Well, a lot of these birds, blackbirds, would have come from North Europe
Right.
to winter, dozens of them, and other thrushes, and hawfinch, which is a bird with a, I don't know, most people will have heard of that. It's got a really large bill. It's a finch that
Uh-huh.
has this huge bill, which can crack open a cherry stone.
Right.
So,
Don't get your
it's,
fingers near
well,
that.
no. I used to have students with me when I was ringing, catching birds and putting rings on them for release and measuring and studying. And if the student, I always knew if there was either a raptor in the net or there was a hawfinch, because you'd hear this shout, Peter, Peter, and because they were frightened to put their fingers near it because it
Right.
got this reputation of being, well, it can crack an olive stone, imagine.
Yeah.
Try doing that.
Peter, you kind of hinted at this, but is there a lot happening in this part of the world in terms of changes or damage to environments?
Oh my golly, yeah, I think. probably the biggest damage, environmentally anyway, is the sometimes sanctioned and other times illegal extraction by
Right.
water. I mean, that affects us all, Bill, because it's not whether you've got an interest in birds or animal life or
Sure.
environment. We all need water. And it seems ridiculous to me. I mean, for instance, there's one area not so far from you where the water reserve is down to 10%,
Yes, I know it.
and farmers complaining
Yeah.
that they should still be able to use that water over and above the well-being of people.
Right.
Well, that can't be right. And also, you've got this really worrying trend. If you think where we are, we're in one of the driest places in Europe.
Mm.
And there we are with all these irrigation schemes and new plantings of olive trees after olive trees after olive trees,
Yeah.
all requiring irrigation. Well, you know, the water is not sustainable for that.
Yeah.
The reserves that we have. And also with olives and other fruit growing trees, and you've got this problem where they actually plough and strip vegetation below ground level from
Mm.
the orchards. And of course, then when we do get a heavy rain, the silts wash into our water supplies, into streams, into mainline rivers, down into wetland areas. And of course, the silt is filled with herbicide, insecticide residue,
Right.
which affects wildlife in the rivers, wildlife in the streams, and pollutes wetlands. And it denigrates wetland status. You know,
Mm.
where some of those wetlands have been absolutely so important for flora and
Absolutely. Yeah.
and crustaceans
Mm.
and certain insect life, which have been decimated by this pollution. And it's awful. And probably one of the greatest illustrations of that currently is the Doñana,
Yes. Sure.
where there's a legal extraction of water, which is sanctioned by municipals,
Mm.
is destroying that area as a national park, totally destroying it, just so somebody can eat a few strawberries and things like that. It's just, it's you despair.
Yeah.
At this time, I can remember, I'm old enough to remember, in the 60s and the 70s and 80s, there was improvement in the UK, for instance, in water quality and things like that. People were making an effort to, you know, fishermen stopped using, you remember, the lead shot on their float systems and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So, because there was a pollution of rivers with that, people were making a real effort, and it's all gone
Yeah.
backwards, it seems to me. And that probably is one of the sadnesses I have with my age,
Yeah.
becoming a grumpy old man about conservation issues, but are hugely important for
Yeah.
future generations. I want my grandkids and kids to see, you know, the things that I've been able to see,
Yeah.
and it's just not going to happen with the way things are going.
Yeah, and well, you said that down in the area where we are, it's not really the farming and things that are causing the problem. It's a constant development. And,
Mm,
you know, like olive trees, more houses means more people, and more people drink more water. And,
exactly, and
and
cause more flooding.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, the changes. I'm not sure that it's necessarily about climate change. I think a lot of it is more to do with humans actually impacting on that aspect of the environment.
Which actually causes climate change
Yeah.
because you're actually destroying things that help the air that we breathe
Mm.
to function. Um, I was always, I mean, I've got friends, one's works for the Met Office and another one is a geologist, and they're always conflicting arguments between the Met man and the geologist who will say, well, look, you know, this has been going on for our life, I mean, the life of the planet,
Yeah.
that things are changing and things do change. And we won't impact on that and we won't affect that. And then you've got the Met guy saying, well, that's a load of bullshit. You know, it's basically, you know, we've added 1.5 degrees to our climate through our own activities and carbon production. So I can listen to these things, but I'm no expert on that,
No.
but I do see changes nearer to me that things are arriving earlier. Birds are arriving from Africa earlier
Right.
than they ever used to. Also, birds, of course, conversely, are leaving earlier. There is changes in the natural world that sort of give you an indication. Now, birds are a great indicator if all's not well.
Right. Yes.
Like the canary in the mine,
Absolutely.
the wild bird will tell you of problems. And there have been huge declines throughout Europe, including Spain, of seed-eating birds, for instance, because of agricultural practices. I mean, when they seed an area, they strip all natural vegetation, which so they leave no marginal land where birds can find food, insect or seed. And then when they put the seeds down, the seeds are dressed already with insecticide.
Aye.
So any bird that's eating that, it's goodbye, and
Yeah,
or at least
absolutely.
over a period of time, or
Yeah.
that affects their reproductive cycle, and so they don't breed, or the eggs are deformed or not fertile. So
Yeah.
these things are going on, and they're well known about. They're documented, agreed upon even by the agricultural sector, but nothing really seems to be happening. But I have to say, Andalusia, in this part of Spain, is probably one of the better areas, although locals might not agree with me or think it, for open space, preserving marginal land, because they use it for hunting. So it's not actually they're doing it for the good of wildlife, but they're doing it for their own purposes,
Sure.
which actually is keeping us relatively healthy in terms of wildlife. So, yeah, I mean, and the other thing to say, Bill, while we're here, avocados. Why
Yeah.
would you plant avocados in Andalusia when you they're another tree that really just needs water, 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 water. I mean, so why would you even agree to let farmers plant that here? Um,
Yeah.
I worry for us.
Yeah.
The water source in particular.
Yeah, yeah, it is a concern, but the good thing is that they're going to have set aside, I think, something like 4 billion euros to look at developing the water collection and storage systems
Yeah,
in Andalusia. So let's hope that's going to have some impact over time.
yeah, me too. I mean, there's always hope, Bill. Never get too depressed.
Yeah,
It's easy to in my world particularly. There's so much doomsaying, but I'm always I think there's always hope, and in order to make things better, you have to work for it,
yeah,
and get your voice heard and get the changes made.
yeah.
That's the way to keep us all nice, spick and span, and healthy.
Indeed. Peter, I think our time is just about up. I really appreciate
Alrighty,
you.
all
Yeah,
right.
I really appreciate you taking the time to do this recording for us because I know that it was going to be impossible for you to do this live with us on Friday.
Friday.
So,
Bill,
Peter,
before we go,
yeah.
can I just mention we have a bird society in Andalusia, at
Ah,
the
yes.
Andalusian Bird Society, and you can go on the web, andalusianbirdsociety.org,
Okay.
and people can join it. €25 a year. It's
Right.
nothing, and that entitles you to free field meetings where you can attend under professional guides once a month, sometimes twice a month, and you get a magazine which appears basically. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see it. Yes.
You get four of those a year, and
Right.
all for your €25. So join us, and enjoy nature with us.
Peter, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
You too,
And
Bill, and
I
thank you
wish
for
you
having me.
all the very best in your birding in the future,
Retirement.
in your birding retirement. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Good luck, Bill.
Thank you.